what is it like to become a locked-in patient? So the short answer is that it's very difficult to describe. So I'll rely on the trailer of this particular movie called Diving Bell and the Butterfly. So let's watch that. Okay, so that's the trailer of the movie, and just a little bit of the spoiler. But what this movie is about is that the guy who became locked-in syndrome, and he initially was not able to do anything, and but he was completely remaining fully conscious, and that is basically depicted as a sort of first-person perspective of the movie, and then the way this movie was constructed is based on the novel, and the novel is the one that is written by that person who became a locked-in syndrome. And the way he actually wrote that movie is really amazing, but he waits until that nurse, the beautiful nurse that you saw in the movie, was saying each of the letter, like A, B, C, D, E, and then when it comes into the particular letter that he wants to, express, then he would blink, like, and then that would be the letter that nurse or some kind of helper notes, and then if you do it repeatedly, then you can construct a word, right? And then by doing this for a really long time, he described what it's like to be him in the full movie, full novel, and then the movie is constructed based on that novel. So what's interesting is that these locked-in patients cannot communicate verbally usually, but can use their remaining channel of the communication, eye movement, the blink, to do the job of communicating. So that's an amazing kind of stuff that he did. Okay. All right. So just a little bit of the background of the where the locked-in syndrome situate within the many different kind of loss of consciousness due to the brain damage and so on. Y-axis of this graph shows a summary of level or contents of consciousness as a sort of overall level, and then the x-axis is the vigilance state, basically the complexity of the behavior response, and then in this 2D graph, conscious and awake state is here, and then coma is here, and then vegetative states, which is the case where people just seem to open the eyes and close the eyes over the time, like sleep and wake cycle, but nothing else is located here. So consciousness level-wise, by many different kind of measures, it's just the same as a coma. And then compared to that, this minimally conscious state is the one that who could communicate with the fMRI that I showed in week 1. And then locked-in syndrome is supposedly here. It's located below conscious wake, but we don't know actually which one is actually above or below. It looks like from the driving bell and butterfly, it's almost equivalent. And then there are many different kind of states of consciousness, but I will not describe this in here today. Okay. So as I mentioned, this part of the brain stem is lesion. If that's the case, then people can become into the locked-in syndrome. You can't move, but eyes. And in terms of brain metabolism, conscious control subjects versus locked-in syndrome subjects have a relatively similar level of brain activity and metabolism overall. But it's quite different when you contrast that with the vegetative state patients. Vegetative states are the state that most likely there's nothing to feel like, and then compared to that, minimally conscious states for subjects tend to have a much more active metabolism over all the brain areas, and these triangulated areas are called the posterior parietal areas. Okay. And this is just a recap of this, Owen study in 2006 that people who lost, who appeared vegetative states. This particular patient had an ability to activate definitely this, posterior part of the, cortex that is indicated by the triangle. So the integrity of that area may be one of the important signs for sustaining consciousness. By the way, to just follow up the Owen study, that kind of study has been or also done and trying to be replicated by many of the subjects. And by the time 2011, 5 out of 54 patients seem to have been able to do such imagery-based yes/no kind of a response. So roughly, maybe 10% of the vegetative initially assessed as a vegetative patient may be actually minimally conscious subjects. And out of 5 of this, patients who passed this test, 2 had really no voluntary behavior. So it's very different even from locked-in syndrome patient. So these patients have no way to communicate, but still was able to activate or deactivate the brain areas upon a request and to communicate. This patient, for example, have a very massive region in the prefrontal cortical areas. Okay, so in sum, the consequence of the brain damage on consciousness are difficult to imagine for us, but sometimes movies allow us to virtually experience what it's like to be a brain damaged patient, and that's the purpose that I kind of recommended you to look at the butterfly, diving bells and butterfly. And the conscious experience of a patient can dissociate from externally observable behaviors, such as a case for the minimally conscious patients. And the brain mechanism of locked-in syndrome and other syndromes are being studied extensively. So you'll hear more about that in the future.